taking my break. So, I've been doing my homework on the American experiment. And if you don't know what the American experiment is, it is a multiracial society. Stable, supposedly. Let me give you the skinny. What Americans don't know is that there is not a singular hegemonic power, right? We talk about, quote, white supremacy, but white people don't exist. So what are we really talking about? We're talking about hegemonic forces, and they unite around this idea of whiteness. They used to identify around this idea of Anglo or Caucasian. Doesn't matter. What was a major predictor of who you voted for had to do with how much education you had. Now, black people voted at damn near all of us. The people who didn't vote for Kamala, I question their blackness. And we're not talking about race, we're talking about blackness. So, what is the big deal? Well, because America has never been a white utopia run by hegemonically dominant white people, white, because race doesn't exist, they don't know, because they haven't been educated, that there are other hegemonic forces in place, and some of them can use whiteness to their advantage. But because of the way that technology is working, white people are in for a rude awakening. Now, I mean white, but consciously, right? Consciously, they pretend that they are white because race doesn't exist. But when they realize that going past the 98th meridian, or, Texas up to North Dakota, when they get into, quote, the West, they are dealing with a whole different animal. This isn't the East Coast, right? So you have clashing right now two entities. We're just going to call them two. There's many, but I'm going to give you two major. The 1619 Project gives you an idea of the first one. And then there is the 1519 Project. This is the one that I've been working on as a scholar and is the nature of my work. So I'm going to guarantee you that the turmoil of this next American administration with 45 or 47 now, it will start to rapidly deteriorate within 18 months of him being inaugurated. Why? Because the undercurrent, the opposition force to white supremacy is going to come from within. Because remember, white doesn't exist. Now, the violence of these people exists, and so we call it white. But without the violence, they don't exist, right? So the violence is going to come from within. And you can already see it now with the world's richest man calling for the death of Lieutenant Colonel Vindman.
This rivalry between billionaires Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos appears to be growing more heated, and potentially at stake with all this could be billions of dollars in space contracts with the Pentagon, as well as who really is the leader when it comes to the private spaceflight industry.
And I don't think you know this, because few do, but coming after the military, and you're not from the military, you're coming up against a separate entity, a force that has its own legal system. So as the Doge Commission picks up, it's going to seem like they're winning, but really they're losing. Every step of their winning is losing, because it's going to make them a bigger target. And trust me, being a target, when the military turns on you, we have the most lethal fighting force ever. And you think some South African immigrant is going to destroy this white utopia? He's going to be eventually become a enemy combatant. Mark my words. So you have two major things happening right now. And if you cut America's, the US, the United States, in half, okay, in half, the vast majority live on the east side, East Coast, New York, all that, right? And about a third, give or take, lives where I am right now, on the other side of the 98th meridian. The idea of frontierism, okay, manifest destiny, genocide against indigenous peoples. Even the white people don't like what happens in the East Coast, because there's a 1519 project that has blossomed into a coalition with the 1619 project. And when I say project, I'm thinking in terms of colonial projects, okay? So we're talking about in 1519, and it could be 1514, it could be 1492, but 1519 refers to, specifically for me, Juan Garrido, a Congolese man who fought on the side of the Spanish, okay? And in fighting for the Spanish, after 30 years of genocidal campaigns against indigenous peoples, they gave him land and power. So, and in giving him land and power, you created a separate force. Now, this was 100 years before 1619. So what you have is a force that may not appear as though it's there because of the coalition and the acceptance of this notion of whiteness. But when the 1519 project realizes that it doesn't align with this notion of white, because they're Mexican, indigenous, Latino, so on, there's going to come a point of rejection. And usually it's around money, but it's coming. So yeah, there's a holiday today, the third week of November, right, on Thursday. Turkeys and that kind of stuff. Remember, there was already a fighting force here when the Europeans got here. It didn't cease to exist. That fighting force goes back thousands of years. Trust me. Give it 18 months. I'll give you an example of how this ends up working out. Europeans rebranded themselves in what they rebranded as the Middle East, which is really just Africa. And their hubris in flying so close to the sun, now that Middle Eastern space has the highest rate of skin cancer. Why? Because it's Africa, the land of the sun, right? So when you fly close to the sun, those wax wings are going to melt. A lot of people are trying to give Donald Trump the credit of possibly being a dictator. He doesn't have the mental capacity to do so. But he does have the mental capacity to hate the people that think they're better than him. And trust me, everyone around him thinks they're better than he is. And they will try to advise him, and it's gonna go wrong, and he's gonna blame them, because you see, he'll blame people who it has nothing to do with them, like eating dogs and cats, right? So yeah, he's gonna turn on the people around him. He did it last time, and this time it's going to be exponentially worse, because he is exponentially worse in his mental decline. So watch it. Get some popcorn and wait for the madness to begin. Now, I'll be honest, I can't predict the future, but I can see patterns. So I am going to see the pattern and then predict what's going to happen. The pattern is there will be an economic decline, a significant one that requires the same kind of stimmy that was so popular. And when it doesn't happen, because of who's in charge of the government, 18 months from now, people are going to be looking for a Congress to slow down the rapid decline. Now, is this rapid decline going to look like the Great Depression? Not right now. But there will be an economic decline that will rival the one that we just had. Why? Because of the policies that people aren't paying attention to. The policies that people are not paying attention to. I'll keep that brief. Now, I've mentioned before how my political leaning is that of an anarchist, if you were putting a label on it. But that's not even a real thing either. But if you were going to, anarchy would be the classic sense of anarchy is what I subscribe to. So I can care less how this American experiment ends. But as a historian, I can easily watch the pattern. So I'm going to give you what to watch for first. These picks for the cabinet, right? It doesn't really matter who they are, okay? What matters is if they get Senate, not if, but Senate confirmation itself. If this starts with usurping the power of the Senate, you will begin to see the rapid devolution. Not like to Because even if something crashes, it bounces off the ground, right? It bounces. So that's not really what I'm saying, that it's going to crash and never come back. What I'm saying is it won't be the same when it comes back. So as this Orange Julius decides to be more dictator-like, there's a lot of things you don't need to pay attention to, right? There's a lot of people still talking about the last election. You can ignore it. Every time you see that, just skip past it. What you want to see is how January 6th, January 20th, March 1st, June, August, and then November again. This economic cycle will kind of give us an idea of how bad it's going to be when it bounces to the bottom.